We are so fortunate this year to have Dr. Virginia Schaefer Horvath as our speaker. As many of you know, she's a SEM grad, class of 1975, who came here on a Gertrude Angel scholarship. So she understands what it means to make a sacrifice for education, to work hard, and then to achieve some pretty powerful goals. As the 13th president of the University of New York at Fredonia, she's also the first woman president at that school. So it's my privilege this morning to welcome Virginia Schaefer to make remarks.
Good morning. Thank you, Mrs. Douglas, and members of the Board of Trustees for inviting me as the Harriet McNulty Adsit lecturer and to be the speaker at your first convocation. I've spent a career in education, so I agree that moments like this, celebrating moments like this through a formal ceremony makes a lot of sense. You'll remember being in this particular place. I don't expect you to remember anything I say or anyone else says to you today, but you'll remember being here. For me, it was 41 years ago that I sat in this very room for my first morning meeting, which we called chapel at the time. I remember being nervous, excited, curious, I'll admit a little bit afraid. I didn't know anyone. I wanted so much to make friends, and I wanted to see if I could handle the challenges of being a SEM student. I had very high expectations of the learning environment I was stepping into, and I was nervous about that and excited about those challenges. I started kindergarten when I was 4, and I'm 54 now, so I can say that for half a century, I have never grown tired of the opening of school. When I go to family reunions, my relatives say, "How's school?" And for 50 years, I've been able to say, "Pretty good." I've never left school. I've never grown tired, and I still get butterflies when I go into a classroom for the first time, as a teacher or as a learner. When I look at a clean new notebook, and I wonder, what will it be filled with before I reach the end of it? When I pick up the books that I'm going to study, and I flip through them, and I think about how much of that will be impressed in my brain before I finish. It's a time of great hopes, September is, for all new students embarking on an adventure, and deciding, what are you going to be like as high school students? For returning students, it's also a time of starting over. You're a little bit older, a little bit wiser in the last year, maybe even taller, with a greater sense, perhaps, of time that's moving, maybe too quickly toward graduation and college and everything that's ahead for you. It's an exciting time for teachers who set high goals for you and who spend a lot of time planning how they're going to help you reach those goals. Last week, when I started the course I'm teaching at Fredonia, I was glad to meet the actual students that I've been thinking about all summer. I really taught the whole course in my head this summer. I had it all worked out, every assignment, I knew where we'd go. And then I met the actual students, and it was a relief to see them engaging in the subject as I'd hoped they would. I'd asked them to complete a survey about their learning goals, because I want to hear from students, what is it that you hope to learn this semester? What is it that you hope this course will bring? I'm inspired when I read what my college students tell me about what they hope to learn. Some of them are very frank. I'm not very good at speaking out in class. I hope I'll get confident by the end of the semester. Or, I know that my writing needs improvement, so help me with that. Or, I really want to learn the content of this course. It's an interesting subject to me and I don't know much about it. They're vulnerable, and they tell me this right at the beginning, that they want help and they want to be able to reach those goals. Last night in class, they were debating an issue, and I was in that great position of stepping back and watching the students take over. They were telling what they thought, they were laughing at each other's jokes, their eyes were lighting up when they were getting certain ideas, and it was great to see in the second week. I was relieved to see them talking with one another, beyond that awkwardness that they had the first few days, and realizing that they could start to talk articulately about a subject. I know this all sounds very romantic, and I'll admit that one of the reasons I've spent a career in higher education is that I never get tired of the fascinating process of learning. Even though the subjects you learn now and the ways that you learn are so different from the days that I was here as a student. Recently I read a book called Too Big to Know that talks about the difference between what we used to think of being smart, the way we used to learn, and now. I remember choosing the subject for my doctoral study and being fascinated by the idea that if I chose medieval literature, all the surviving subjects would stretch across this podium. There aren't that many books that survive, so I felt confident that I could be a master. I could read everything and understand it. There wasn't that much to know. Now, we can, through our smartphones, access more information than a public library holds in just a matter of seconds. And knowledge changes so quickly that I think for a new generation of learners, the challenges are to get at information, to be able to work networks and find how to judge whether information is worthwhile, how to go forward from ideas that you get. It's a very different skill set from my days spent in archives looking at medieval manuscripts. Much of the journey you're beginning here today isn't romantic at all. It's just plain hard work. And sometimes it can be discouraging and even frustrating. I'd like to tell a story about one of my first experiences at SEM. I haven't told this story before. It's something I think I was embarrassed about for a long time. Before we started school, when I was a freshman, we went to Ellicottville. We went on a kind of retreat so that we could get to know one another before going to school. I was excited about that, and my parents were excited about it and nervous for me. I was very shy, I was very quiet, and it was so important to my family, as I'm sure it is to all of your families, that you do well in school, that you make friends, that you're happy at school. So before going on that trip, my mother took me shopping. She wanted me to have some new clothes. She bought me a short set. It was horrible. It was turquoise shorts, and it had a belt and a white blouse with a little collar on it. This was 1971. People were wearing jeans and beads and not little matched short sets with white shirts. But it was given to me by my mom, so of course I was going to wear it. I knew that wasn't what other people were going to wear. I knew I looked very weird going to this retreat. And I remember we had little rooms and we all brought our sleeping bags and we set things down. And I had an experience that was still is a little bit painful for me. I put my stuff in a room, and after a while I came back and the girls in that room put my stuff out in the hall. So I put my stuff in another room thinking I'll spend the night with these girls in this room. And those girls put my stuff out in the hall. It was embarrassing to me, and I didn't want to say anything to the teachers that I was not going to be welcomed in those rooms. I remember standing on the porch of that place we were staying and just trying to hide. It stood out there singing. I remember singing a long time, not knowing where to go, not knowing what to do. My point isn't self-pity about this, but persistence. The girls who were there were not malicious. These were not mean girls. These were not people who were trying to leave me out or tell me that I wasn't very good. They were friends with each other. They didn't know me. I'm quiet. I'm in weird clothes. I understand now why it was a challenge maybe for them to reach out to me and embrace me. They were probably scared too, and they were probably worried about what it was like to be different, or if you reach out to the weird girl, are people going to judge you? I came away from that experience, of course, went home and told my parents I had a wonderful time, and I tried to remember the names of the girls that I wanted to be like. I went home and I said, I met these girls and they're terrific, and I want to be like them, and I want to be their friends. It was a goal for me to overcome my own shyness and to to be able to be accepted by some of these girls from whom I was an outsider. They did become my friends through studying together, through working together, through eating lunch together, through having a good time with each other. We grew together. Things didn't start too well for me, I'll admit, but I was eventually elected Student Government Association president, and I was awarded the Trustees Award on class day. My point is that I didn't give up on myself or on my classmates, and that's really good in a school this size. You can disagree with each other. You can be in a bad mood. You can even be mean to someone about something petty. But come the next day, you're going to be sitting next to that same girl in class, and you have to figure out a way to move through whatever tangle it is that you're in. It's a life skill that really helps on the job, where there's no place to hide, and where disagreements have to be worked through. They can't be run from. You can't go out on the deck and sing when you encounter disagreements. It's true in relationships that you have now and in the future. It's true when you become leaders and you're organizing people and events. And I hope when you work for peace and justice in the communities that you will serve. I learned a lot right here about the value of being inescapable, of shrugging and finding some way to move on when things don't go just as I planned. I learned so many other lessons in the halls of this building. I learned about developing the habits of inquiry that allowed me to read critically and to ask 100 questions in the margin of every text. I learned to cite sources, to expand my vocabulary, to learn a second language, to type 100 words per minute. That was on a manual typewriter. It served me well. To push myself athletically. I learned to use the right cases and to match subjects and verbs. When I'm in this room, I still remember we would be here for announcements and our teachers would sit along the back. And if we made a mistake in grammar by saying something such as, if you have a question, see Martha or I, the teachers would shout from the back, me! They would correct our grammar publicly during chapel. And if we said, they would make sounds. We learned to speak without ums, without nos, without those kind of verbal tics. So I have a lot of nervousness here thinking about there in the back of the room. But along with world history and linear algebra and microbiology, I learned about student government and about ceramics and about the women's movement and about the challenges we face in a democracy. I hope that all of you, as you start this school year, are finding many ways to learn about yourself, what you value, what you do, and what you can do that you've never thought you could. I'd like to encourage you to keep a few things in mind. First, and this is something I learned at this school, it's cool to be smart. That's not always the message you get in our culture. And unfortunately, it's not often the message for women. It's cool to be smart. I remember a Barbie doll that talked and said, I can't do math. Or games. I remember going to, when my children were young, going to the toy store and going down the pink aisle and seeing all the things that were for girls that promoted things like shopping and fashion. It's cool to be smart. It was a relief for me to be in this school in small classes with other smart young women. I hope you'll use every day this year to be as smart as you can. Don't be shy about learning more, about testing what it is you know, and sharing ideas you have. It's not showing off. You don't have to put others down if you're smart. You ask good questions. You seek out a range of answers. You experiment. You help others see something they hadn't before. You have fun with ideas. You play if you're smart. I encourage you to get to know your own voice, the small, quiet one inside you that pushes you to dream audaciously, and the louder one that you use to connect with others. I was glad to come in the door today and hear your voices. They're powerful, and they can do more good and more harm than you imagine. I encourage you to use your voice, not only to test and explain and advance your own views, but to speak up for others. It takes courage to speak, as I learned here when I was 13. People might question you, or they might even make fun of you, but don't give up or withdraw. And it does take courage to say one's feelings honestly, to choose something other than gossip, and to say to a person directly, maybe you didn't mean it that way, but what you just said hurt me. Your voice is powerful. You can use it to make a difference. Last year we had a speaker on our campus named Maura Cullen who talked about her book, 35 Dumb Things Smart People Say When They Talk About Diversity. And she was saying we all get in trouble by saying certain things to one another that show that we judge one another on the basis of race or gender or sexual orientation or political views. We don't mean to, but we put our foot in it quite a bit. And she said the challenge, if you're going to get over issues of diversity, if you're really going to reach a point of understanding, is to be able to use your voice and to correct someone in a way that's respectful and gentle when they make the wrong assumptions about you and who you are and what you believe. Use that voice to help each other. Finally, I want to encourage you to listen to others' voices. You don't even have to speak the same language to be able to be profoundly affected by what others say. And I have two rather humbling stories about this. When I left SEM in June of 1975, I was fortunate to be an AFS student studying abroad in Kenya. And it was something that the school sponsored me for, and it was a life-changing experience. I lived in Nairobi with a family that had a 3-year-old boy, a 2-year-old boy, and twins who had been born a few weeks before I arrived. So 4 children, 4 very young children. The mother had had a stroke during delivery. So the whole time that I was there, the mother was bedridden and had no speech. She could not really move very well, and there was a servant girl and I who took care of those 4 boys and the mother. It was quite an experiment in language. I had studied through the generosity of one of my teachers at SEM, who had lent me a Swahili dictionary and a Bible, saying you can practice reading this and use the dictionary to understand. I could speak very small phrases in Swahili. That was it. The father of the family insisted that the children all speak only Swahili in the home. He really took pride in the new national language, wanted them to speak it. The servant did not speak Swahili. She spoke only a tribal language. So there we were, two girls, really, I was 17, she was probably 15, and 4 very young boys, and a bedridden woman, none of whom spoke the same language. It was quite an experiment in listening to each other's voices and responding, even though grammatically I had no idea what was being said. Now I took great pride in the fact that when I said my first sentence in Swahili that one of the boys listened to, I thought, wow, this really works. I said, "Kuya pa na kula mai," come in here and eat your lunch. And Leonie came in. Okay, language is powerful. But of course he could argue with me as a 3-year-old much better than I could. I learned a lot about taking small steps with language, learning to use music. We put on music for the twins, we put on music for the boys, and that became a way to communicate. But it was a great experience for me about the way eyes communicate, the way tone of voice communicates, and the way people can learn to live in community even if they can't speak any of the same grammar. Later, when I became an English teacher, I also taught English as a foreign language. And I had one experience that, again, reminded me of the difference between what we can say with our voice and what's in our hearts. I had a student who was new to the United States. She had come from Korea with her husband. And he was a student and had some mastery of English. But she came to the United States without being able to speak any English. We started at a very basic point, identifying nouns, trying to string them together into sentences. And she struggled. She really struggled to put these sentences together. She was shy, she was embarrassed, and one day, that was particularly frustrating, she took my hand, and I didn't know where we were going, but she dragged me across campus, and she took me into the music building. We went into one of the small rehearsal rooms. I had no idea why we were going there. And she sat down at the piano, and she played in a way that made me cry. I thought, here is this person who cannot express herself, but what she's saying to me is, I'm in here. I'm a person with talent. I'm a person with abilities. I don't have the grammar to be able to express anything to you, but this is my soul I'm sharing with you. It was humbling for me because it challenged my own assumptions about how well people can speak and whether that's a measure of what's inside of them. One of my stepdaughters has Down syndrome, and I think of her quite a bit, and that pianist who played for me. Susan is not very articulate, but there's a soul in there, and she reminds me all the time that sometimes we need beyond our voices to reach inside a person and to be able to recognize and value what she brings to the conversation. What you're being offered today through this school year at SEM, I know will prepare you for whatever lies ahead. Living in community as you are, whether you're day students or whether you're residential students, it will prepare you for the societies that I expect you'll be leading. Collaborating with other women instead of competing and criticizing will give you a sense of the networks that will open doors for you and eventually lead you to be able to help others. Be nice to each other. And be attentive to your own voice and your own growing knowledge that will help you find and claim your place in your classes, in your communities, and later. Know that as I begin an exciting year in my new role at a university and as a SEM trustee, I'll be thinking about you every day and looking forward to the end of the year when I can hear more about what you did and what you accomplished and what you learned this year. Have a great start to the year, and thanks for your attention.